Imagine sitting in a room where every camera is pointed at you, millions of people are watching, and the person on stage isn't there to praise you, he's there to expose you live. Now here's the real question: what would you do if that person was Ricky Gervais? It all began with a moment that perfectly captured the chaos, confidence, and razor-sharp brilliance of Ricky Gervais. Standing on stage with that familiar, almost disarming casualness, he admitted he hadn't even attended the previous year's ceremony, a detail he brushed off as a minor regret. And yet, despite his absence, he had still somehow managed to win. It was the kind of statement that shouldn't make sense, and that's exactly why it worked. He let the silence stretch just long enough for the audience to process it, savoring the confusion flickering across their faces before leaning in ever so slightly and asking, "Do you remember?" In that single moment, he blurred the line between arrogance and humor, turning what could have been a throwaway comment into something unforgettable. It was bold, absurd, a little provocative, and completely unmistakably Ricky. And that's precisely what sets him apart. In an industry built on image control, where every word is polished, every reaction is rehearsed, and every joke is carefully approved, Ricky operates by an entirely different set of rules. He doesn't arrive with the intention of pleasing the room, he arrives to disrupt it. While others rely on safe humor designed to keep everyone comfortable, Ricky leans into discomfort, using it as a tool to expose the unspoken truths that linger beneath the surface of celebrity culture. There's a certain tension that follows him the moment he steps onto that stage. It's subtle at first, barely noticeable, but it grows with every word he speaks. The audience laughs, but not always happens afterward. In any other setting, jokes like his might end careers, close doors, or spark outrage that lingers for years. But somehow Ricky defies that pattern. Instead of being shut out, he's invited back, again and again. Each return feels almost like a challenge, an unspoken agreement between him and the industry that says, "Let's see how far you'll go this time." With every appearance, the stakes feel higher. The jokes cut deeper, the reactions grow more intense, and yet the audience keeps watching, drawn in by the same question that hangs in the air every time he takes the stage. What will he say next, and who will it be about? Because when Ricky Gervais is holding the microphone, one thing is always certain: no one in that room is completely safe. Award shows are usually built on predictability. They follow a familiar rhythm: polished smiles, carefully written jokes, standing ovations that feel almost rehearsed, and speeches crafted to offend no one. Everything is designed to maintain an image, to preserve a sense of perfection. But the moment Ricky Gervais steps onto that stage, that carefully constructed illusion begins to crack. The energy in the room shifts almost instantly. It becomes tighter, heavier, more uncertain. The laughter still comes, but it's different, it's layered. Beneath every chuckle, there's hesitation, a quiet awareness that something unexpected could happen at any second. Because with Ricky, there's no script anyone can rely on, no safe zone, no warning. The camera pans across the audience and you can see it in their expressions, half amusement, half anticipation, and just a hint of concern. No one knows who he's going to call out next. Every pause feels deliberate, every glance feels targeted. Every line carries a weight that goes beyond comedy, turning even the smallest joke into a moment of suspense. And then, just when the room settles into that uneasy rhythm, Ricky chooses his target. One of the most unforgettable moments came when he turned his attention to Mel Gibson. It was a name loaded with history, controversy, and public scrutiny. Given Gibson's past, especially his widely publicized drunken incident, many assumed Ricky would either avoid the subject entirely or approach it with caution, perhaps masking it in softer humor. After all, this was still an award show, a place where uncomfortable truths are usually dressed up and diluted. But Ricky doesn't dilute anything. Instead, he leaned directly into it. With a tone that almost sounded calm, almost forgiving, he brought up the incident, framing it in a way that felt strangely relatable. He suggested that everyone at some point has said things they regret after a few drinks. The audience responded with nervous laughter, a collective exhale rippling through the room. For a brief moment, it seemed like Ricky might actually be taking it easy, that maybe just this once he would soften the blow. But that relief didn't last long. Because if there's one thing Ricky Gervais never does, it's stop halfway. He let the laughter settle, watching the room carefully, almost studying the reaction. Then, with perfect timing, he shifted the tone. What began as a seemingly harmless acknowledgement suddenly evolved into something sharper, something far more deliberate. He reminded everyone that he now had the awkward responsibility of introducing Mel Gibson again, and the way he said it carried just enough tension to make people sit up a little straighter. You could feel it, the shift, the moment where the audience realized this wasn't over. Then came the line that cut straight through the room. Ricky, without raising his voice or changing his expression, delivered a comparison so unexpected, so unapologetically blunt that it hit like a shockwave. The laughter that followed wasn't immediate, it came in waves, mixed with gasps, disbelief, and the unmistakable sound of people reacting before they even had time to process what they'd just heard. Some clapped, some froze, some looked around as if checking whether it was safe to laugh. And Ricky, he stood there completely unfazed. That's the part that makes it even more powerful. He doesn't rush past the moment, he lets it breathe. He allows the discomfort to exist, almost inviting it, as if to say that this tension, this unease, is exactly the point. By the time Mel Gibson finally stepped onto the stage, the atmosphere had completely changed. What should have been a routine introduction had turned into a moment people would remember long after the show ended. And just when it seemed like Ricky might step back and let the moment pass, he pushed once more, asking a question so direct, so unfiltered, that it blurred the line between comedy and confrontation entirely. It wasn't just about getting a laugh anymore. It was about control, timing, nerve. And in that moment, Ricky Gervais proved something very few performers ever can, that he wasn't just hosting the show. He owned it. He leaned into the moment with precision, speaking about the awkward dating that he would rather have a drink with Mel than with Bill Cosby. For a split second, there was silence. Then came the reaction, laughter colliding with disbelief, applause mixed with nervous glances. It wasn't just funny, it was shocking in a way that only Ricky could pull off. But he didn't stop there. Just as the audience was still processing what they had heard, Ricky pushed even further. Turning directly to Mel in front of millions watching, he asked him to explain a controversial phrase he had once used. It was bold, unfiltered, and undeniably uncomfortable. Yet somehow, wrapped in Ricky's delivery, it still landed as comedy. That's what made the moment so powerful. It wasn't just a joke. It was a confrontation disguised as humor, a moment where truth and entertainment collided in real time. And then, as if shifting gears without warning, Ricky moved on. When it came time to introduce Tom Hanks and Tim Allen, the atmosphere subtly changed. These were not controversial figures. These were icons, widely respected, deeply admired, and loved by audiences around the world. Naturally, people expected Ricky to take a softer approach, to offer a warm, respectful introduction that matched their reputation. But Ricky doesn't follow expectations, he rewrites them. His introduction carried a quiet sharpness, a tone that hinted at something more than simple praise. What could have been a straightforward celebratory moment quickly turned into something layered with humor and irony. The audience laughed, but again there was that familiar edge, because with Ricky even admiration can come with a twist. What made the moment truly memorable, though, was what happened next. Tom Hanks and Tim Allen didn't just accept the joke, they embraced it. They stepped into Ricky's world and responded with humor of their own, effortlessly turning the spotlight back on him. They reminisced about a time when Ricky was, in their words, slightly chubby and very kind. It sounded almost nostalgic until they delivered the punchline, noting that he was now neither. The timing was perfect. The room erupted not just because it was funny, but because it flipped the dynamic. For once, Ricky wasn't the only one in control of the narrative. The joke had come full circle and he was now part of it. There was a sense of balance in that exchange, a rare moment where the usual tension dissolved into something more playful, more mutual. And that contrast made it stand out even more. Because while Ricky is known for pushing boundaries, moments like these remind us of something equally important. He thrives not just on confrontation, but on connection through humor, even when that humor cuts both ways. Ricky's ability to uncover humor in places others wouldn't even dare to look became even more evident when he shifted his focus to stars like Johnny Depp and Angelina Jolie. With Depp, the joke was delivered with effortless simplicity, yet it hit with remarkable precision. By describing him as someone who would wear absolutely anything Tim Burton asked him to, Ricky tapped into a truth so widely recognized that the audience couldn't help but laugh instantly. It wasn't loud or aggressive, it was subtle, almost understated, but that's exactly what made it so effective. The humor didn't need exaggeration because the reality behind it was already strong enough. But when Ricky turned his attention to Angelina Jolie, the atmosphere shifted ever so slightly. The tone became sharper, more delicate, walking a fine line between humor and discomfort. His joke didn't just aim for laughter, it challenged it. The audience reacted, but not without hesitation. You could sense people laughing while simultaneously questioning whether they should be. And that's where Ricky operates at his best, right at that intersection where comedy meets reality, where the truth behind the joke lingers just long enough to make it feel a little too real. He doesn't just tell jokes, he creates moments that force the audience to confront what they're laughing at. And just as quickly as he created that tension, he redirected it toward another target, Leonardo DiCaprio. Now, DiCaprio is widely celebrated for his talent, his dedication to his craft, and a career filled with iconic performances. Most hosts would lean into that, highlighting his achievements, praising his success. But Ricky, as always, chose a different angle. Instead of focusing on his work, he zeroed in on something far more personal, something the public had already noticed but rarely addressed so openly. With flawless timing, he delivered the line that would instantly become one of the most talked about jokes of the night. Referring to the length of a nearly 3-hour film, he quipped that by the time it ended, DiCaprio's date would already be too old for him. It was quick, sharp, and impossible to ignore. The camera cut to Leonardo, who responded with a polite smile, the kind that suggested he understood the joke but couldn't completely hide the slight discomfort behind it. And that reaction only made the moment more powerful. Because Ricky had once again done what he does best. He took something widely known, something quietly acknowledged, and brought it into the spotlight in a way that no one in that room could pretend not to notice. It wasn't just a joke, it was a moment of exposure, delivered with perfect comedic timing. Then came one of the boldest and most unsettling moments of the night, the joke referencing Jeffrey Epstein. In an instant, the energy in the room shifted. What had once felt like a glamorous, untouchable space suddenly seemed smaller, more exposed. The laughter that had flowed so freely before now hesitated at the edge of silence. Ricky's words carried a different kind of weight this time. He wasn't just playing with punchlines. He was brushing up against something real, something sensitive, something many in that room would have preferred to keep unspoken. He didn't dance around it, he didn't soften it. Instead, he acknowledged the connection directly, stripping away the usual layers of politeness that shield conversations like this. The punchline landed with a bluntness that felt almost jarring. For a brief moment, there was a pause, an unspoken question hanging in the air. Was it okay to laugh at this? Should they laugh at this? And then the reaction came, but it wasn't the same as before. The laughter was scattered, uneven, almost cautious. Some people laughed instinctively, others held back, and a few simply sat in silence, unsure how to respond. It was one of those rare moments where comedy stopped being purely entertainment and became something more, something that forced the room to confront its own discomfort. Ricky didn't try to ease that tension. If anything, he allowed it to linger, letting the silence and uncertainty become part of the performance itself. That's what made it unforgettable. Because in that moment, Ricky wasn't just telling jokes, he was holding up a mirror. And by the time he returned for his 5th time hosting the Golden Globes, it was clear that he had reached a point where he no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. There was no sense of hesitation left, no desire to win approval or play to expectations. If anything, there was a sense of complete freedom in the way he carried himself, a performer who had nothing to lose and therefore nothing holding him back. That freedom gave him the confidence to deliver one of his most direct and unapologetic statements. Addressing the winners, he cut straight through the usual ceremony and sentimentality. He told them plainly not to use their acceptance speeches as platforms for political messaging. It wasn't framed as a suggestion, it felt more like a command, delivered with the kind of blunt honesty that only Ricky could get away with. The audience reacted immediately, some laughing, others shifting in their seats, recognizing the truth buried beneath the humor. Then he pushed it further. With sharp, calculated timing, he reminded them that many of them were in no real position to lecture the public. It was a line designed to provoke, and it worked, but it was the comparison to Greta Thunberg that hit the hardest. By pointing out that many in that room had spent less time in education than she had, he managed to turn what could have been a simple joke into something far more pointed. The reaction was mixed, laughter, discomfort, applause, and silence all blending together. And that contrast was exactly what made the moment so powerful. Because once again, Ricky had done what he does best. He took a room full of people who are used to being admired, protected, and celebrated, and reminded them, in the most public way possible, that they are just as open to scrutiny as anyone else. He brought the moment to a close with a brutally simple instruction, one that cut through the ceremony like a blade. Winners, he said, should come up, accept their award, thank the necessary people, and then leave. No long speeches, no grandstanding, no turning the stage into a platform, just take the trophy and go. The audience laughed, but there was something sharper beneath it. Because hidden inside that humor was a critique, a quiet but unmistakable reminder of how far removed celebrity culture can sometimes feel from the reality most people live in. It was the kind of line that lingered long after it was spoken. Because Ricky Gervais doesn't walk onto a stage to make people comfortable. Comfort has never been his goal. He steps into the spotlight to challenge it, to disrupt it. He peels back the carefully polished surface of Hollywood and reveals what lies underneath. The awkwardness, the contradictions, the very human flaws that fame tries so hard to hide. His comedy isn't just about laughter, it's about perspective. It forces the audience to think, to question, to sit with a feeling that isn't always easy to process. And that's exactly why people keep watching. Not just for the jokes, but for the unpredictability, for the tension, for that electric sense that anything could happen at any moment. Because no matter how many times Ricky takes the stage, no matter how many boundaries he pushes or lines he crosses, there's always that same question hanging in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone in the room. Who will he go after next? And deep down, every single person sitting there, every actor, every director, every executive, already knows the truth. It could be anyone. It could be them. If you enjoy content like this, raw, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore, make sure you subscribe, because the next moment might be even more shocking than this one.